You know the sound. That sharp metallic snap of a lever-action rifle. It echoes through 100 westerns, a sound so familiar it feels carved into America's memory. John Wayne carried one. Chuck Connors spun one. Steve McQueen sawed one off and wore it like a pistol. Hollywood told us the Winchester won the West. But here's the truth. When the smoke cleared from the Civil War, the company didn't even exist yet. Winchester was founded in 1866, a year after Appomattox. So how did a rifle that arrived late to the frontier become the rifle that would capture the heart of a nation? That sound, the Winchester's lever snapping shut, wasn't just history. It was heritage. It was the sound of justice, courage, and a promise that the American people wanted to believe in. I'm Rowan, and this is OTRA Legends. Let's get into it. The movie that built the myth. In 1950, Winchester 73 hit the silver screen. It wasn't just another Western, it was the one that turned a rifle into a legend. James Stewart had just come home from World War II. He wasn't the same soft-spoken hero audiences remembered. He'd flown combat missions over Europe, and the war had changed him. When he picked up that Winchester on screen, it felt different, heavier, more personal. The story followed a single rifle, a rare 1-of-1000 model 1873, as it passed from hand to hand across the frontier. Outlaw, soldier, Indian trader, gunslinger. Each life touched by it, each story ending the same way, with a trigger pull. Hollywood turned that rifle into destiny. What most moviegoers didn't know was that the 1-of-1000 rifles were real. In the 1870s, Winchester actually tested every model 1873 for accuracy, engraving the best of them for sale at a premium price. Only about 130 were ever made, a clever bit of 19th century marketing long forgotten until Hollywood resurrected it. The timing couldn't have been better. Post-war America was looking for reminders of courage and craftsmanship, proof that toughness still lived at its core. And Winchester 73 delivered. By the time the credits rolled, the company didn't have to advertise a thing. Hollywood had done it for them. Audiences left believing Winchester wasn't just a gun, it was the gun. The one that tamed the wilderness, even if history said otherwise. Hollywood didn't just sell tickets, it sold a legend. But it didn't stay on the big screen. It came home, into every living room in America. Enter the rifleman. It was when Hollywood brought the Winchester home. Then television took over. In 1958, the rifleman hit American living rooms, 168 episodes, 5 years, one unforgettable sound. Chuck Connors firing 12 rounds in 5 seconds flat. That rifle wasn't historical. It was Hollywood engineering. The oversized lever loop was made for spectacle. It let Connors spin-cock the Winchester midair, one-handed. Real cowboys never did this. It was impractical, inaccurate, and completely mesmerizing. But it looked right. The rhythm, the recoil, the flash, all pure frontier fantasy. Accuracy didn't matter. Speed mattered. Style mattered. Every kid watching learned that justice came with a lever action and lightning reflexes. Soon, toy makers joined the show. Heabley sold official rifleman sets. Mattel Toys flooded store shelves with shiny carbines. Christmas 1960 sounded like a shootout in every living room. But the rifleman wasn't just about shooting, it was about raising a son. Each episode ended with Lucas McCain teaching his boy Mark what it meant to live right, hard work, honesty, courage, and when necessary, standing your ground with a Winchester. Fathers and sons watched together, and somewhere between the commercials, the rifle became more than a prop. It became a bond, a symbol of strength, guidance, and the quiet duty to protect what's yours. By the early 60s, Winchester wasn't just part of the West, it was the West. A fixture of childhood, a piece of American identity. And as that generation grew up, another face stepped in to show them what that rifle looked like. in the hands of a hero. While sons were learning about heroes on television, fathers were learning about them from someone larger than life. Enter John Wayne and the weapon that built a man. For 3 decades, he was the frontier incarnate. In nearly every film, Stagecoach, Red River, True Grit, he carried a Winchester 1892 carbine. Not a Sharps, not a Spencer, always a Winchester. When Wayne held that rifle, it wasn't about aim, it was about authority. He moved with it like it belonged to him, as natural as his stride, as steady as his voice. In Stagecoach, 1939, he spun it one-handed, the move that would become his signature. Director John Ford knew the way a man handled his rifle, said everything about who he was. Confident, calm, deadly when he had to be. A decade later, in Red River, Wayne had hardened into Tom Dunson, a cattle baron who built an empire at gunpoint. His Winchester was never far. It was the symbol of control, a tool to enforce order and claim the land. Here the rifle wasn't about justice anymore, it was about power. And by True Grit in 1969, both man and legend were aging. Rooster Cogburn, one-eyed, fearless, charging 4 outlaws with reins in his teeth, Winchester in one hand, pistol in the other. It was absurd. It was glorious. And it was pure American ideology. That scene became an ending, not just for a movie, but for an era. The old hero riding one last time into the sunset, rifle blazing. For 30 years, Wayne and Winchester were inseparable, the man and the myth, welded together in America's imagination. When audiences pictured the frontier, they pictured John Wayne. And when they pictured Wayne, they saw that lever-action Winchester. By the time the Duke rode off for the last time, the rifle had already become an icon. That made it famous. When Hollywood rewrote history. By the late 50s, even television was inventing new versions of the Winchester. Steve McQueen's Wanted, Dead or Alive introduced the mare's leg, a chopped-down Winchester 1892 short enough to holster. It was never carried across the frontier, but it carried the spirit of it. It was never meant for real life. It was built for legend. But on camera, it was unforgettable. McQueen could draw it like a pistol and fire it like a rifle. It looked unique, modern, cool, and it sold the idea that Winchester had built a weapon for every kind of hero, even the ones Hollywood made up. Behind the scenes, the prop masters knew the secret. The real frontier favored the heavy, slow-loading Henrys and Spencers, but those jammed and smoked under studio lights. The Winchester 1892, built decades after the frontier closed, cycled cleanly, ejected fast, and looked beautiful on film. It became Hollywood's go-to rifle simply because it worked every time. From John Ford's Stagecoach to Wayne's True Grit, nearly every frontier Winchester was that same 1892 model, polished and reused from one picture to the next. When color television arrived, prop houses kept using the same rifles. The 1892 appeared in Bonanza, The Rifleman, Gunsmoke, Rawhide, a single design standing in for an entire century of history. The real West had a dozen rifles. Hollywood had one. The mare's leg lived on for decades, resurfacing in Supernatural, Firefly, even The Mandalorian. Collectors still buy them because the Winchester isn't just a gun, it's an American icon, brought to life by Hollywood's golden age. But by the 1970s, the Western was fading. Vietnam had changed how Americans saw violence. Watergate changed how they saw heroes. But the Winchester didn't die. In 1990, Tom Selleck's Quigley Down Under tried to bring the real guns of the frontier back, the heavy, accurate Sharps rifle. Yet even there, the villains carried Winchesters. The legend was too big to ignore. Hollywood had hardwired it into the American mind. But what really armed the frontier? Not just the Winchester, and not only the men who carried it on film, but the dream they represented. The truth behind the legend. Step away from the screen, and the story shifts. The real frontier wasn't won by one rifle. Settlers used whatever worked. Spencers, Henrys, Remingtons, Springfields, whatever they could afford or carry. However, one gun would become America's favorite, one that would rise above the rest. Not by war or conquest, but by the way it made people feel. Winchester's model, 1873, arrived 8 years after the Civil War, just as America was learning how to rebuild itself. Its design was smooth, its action reliable, and its craftsmanship unmatched. The later model 1892, the rifle that Hollywood would immortalize, came as the frontier was closing, but the dream of it lived on. When directors and prop masters needed a rifle that looked as bold and timeless as the West itself, they reached for the Winchester. It cycled cleanly, never jammed, and caught the light just right. You could spin it, reload it, and it always looked heroic doing it. That is why it became the rifle of the silver screen, not just for how it fired, but for how it felt. A rifle that began as an invention of industry became a symbol of identity. It became the gun that didn't just win the West, it won America's heart. The weapon America believed in. Maybe that's the real power of the Winchester.
The Winchester model,
not what it did, but what we needed it to mean. A symbol of grit, of nostalgia, of the heroes we still wish we could be. The Winchester never conquered the frontier. It gave people a way to feel like they were part of it. That wild, untamed country where courage still mattered and legends still lived. The next time that lever snaps shut, let it take you back to a time when courage, craftsmanship, and hope still rang across the American frontier. I'm Rowan, and this is OTRA Legends. If you've enjoyed uncovering this story, keep the legend alive. Explore
a gun that saved lives, protected great leaders like Theodore Roosevelt, and truly changed how weapons were made. Introducing the Winchester Model 1886. But for its inventor, it was a curse in disguise, bringing ruin instead of reward. What's the story behind this legendary weapon's dark truth? One that saved everyone except the man who created it. Rough and untamed. Buffalo wandered the plains. Grizzly bears ruled the mountains. And cowboys moved cattle across open land.
There are several common versions of the shotgun found
a good rifle,
the majority of which are 12 gauge.
It was
the M1917 was also sold in 16
and Winchester
gauge.
was about to
Probably
introduce
the
a
most
rifle
famous version
that would
of the
change the game
M1917
forever.
is the
But
trench gun variant,
what made this
which
rifle
offers a
so
shorter
special?
20-inch barrel,
Why
heat
do
shield,
people
and
still talk
bayonet
about it
bug.
today, over 130 years later? Well, let's go back in time.
The riot
The
gun
story
is probably
starts
the most common
with a
version you
problem.
find on film. It's the
Winchester
same
was
length as
famous
the
for
trench gun,
making
but lacks the
lever
heat shield
action
and bayonet
rifles.
lug.
The kind
This was
where
most commonly
you push down a lever under the gun to load a new bullet. Their older models worked fine for smaller bullets, but bigger.
It's also good to note that many of these collector shotguns are Norinco-made
Hunters
M1917
needed these stronger
clones.
bullets to
You
take
can
down
see
big
John
animals
Olin sawing
like
the barrel
buffalo,
off one in
moose,
No Country for
and
Old
bears.
Men. Obviously,
Winchester
a smart
needed a new
choice over
design,
destroying an authentic
or
M97,
they'd lose business
as they can
to
be
other
rather
gun makers.
pricey in good condition.
Thomas Bennett, the vice president of Winchester, knew he needed help. Bennett decided to look for the smartest gun designer he could
The
find.
M97 was
And that
customizable.
search
Barrels could
led
be
him to
ordered
a
up to
small
36
workplace
inches in
in
length.
Utah. Though
Here's
only
Vincent
28
D'Onofrio in
years
Men in
old,
Black, holding a field
John Moses
M97.
Browning
This is the same
had a
actor who
special
played Private
talent
Pyle in Full
for
Metal
designing
Jacket.
guns. He seemed to understand how metal and springs worked together in a way that amazed everyone who saw his
Winchester
creations.
M97 variants
When
were
Bennett
also
visited
offered as a
Browning's
solid
shop
frame
in
or as a
1883,
takedown.
what he
Shown
saw
here with
there
Tommy Lee Jones
stopped
playing
him
a Vietnam
in his
veteran
tracks.
in the 1977
Browning had created
classic
something
Rolling
completely
Thunder.
new, a
Takedown
lever
reports are
action
easy
rifle,
to clean
strong
and
enough
transport.
to handle the biggest bullets of the day. The story goes that Bennett was so impressed that he bought the rights
Winchester
to the
made
design on the spot,
1897 a highly
not even
marketable
bothering to
shotgun,
negotiate the
as it
actual
was
price.
popular with American
And back in the
soldiers,
day,
the police,
bargaining
and
was not
hunters.
rare. It was a way of living. So imagine how valuable this rifle had to be for him to buy it immediately. That's what happened with Browning's
Though
new
most
rifle
people
design.
associate the M97
Well,
with
inside
World War I
every gun
and its brutal
is
trench
a
gun
system that
reputation.
loads bullets,
Its military
fires them,
application started
and
well
gets
before
rid
that,
of the empty shells.
and it was used in pre-World War
This is
I
called
conflicts, such as during the
action.
Philippine-American War
Browning's
and
new action
Mexican-American
used two
border war.
strong metal blocks that locked everything tightly in place
From the moment
when
you set
firing.
foot in Mexico.
Think of it like
Even
this.
before.
Older rifles closed
In the
like
wind
a
of the
simple
line,
door latch.
the M1917
But
is shown
Browning's
frequently
design
used
was like
during the
adding
Perdicaris
two
incident
heavy, dead
involving
bolts.
U.S. Marines in Morocco.
This made the rifle
Though this film
incredibly
is
strong.
overall very
With this
ahistoric,
new design,
it's a good
the
Connery
rifle could
classic,
safely fire
showing
the
the
biggest,
significant early
most
use of the
powerful bullets available.
M97 with American
The
forces.
4570 government, the 4590 Winchester,
I'll see
and
you
even the
again, Mr.
massive
Pettigrew.
50-pound to 110 Express.
By World War I,
These were
the
bullets
M97 had
that
already
could stop
proved
a
itself
charging
useful in
grizzly
close
bear
quarter
with one
combat
shot.
and was
Have you
popular
ever
with
seen a
American
grizzly
troops
bear?
at the onset of the war
They
for
can weigh
America.
over 800 pounds
Interestingly, however,
and stand 8 feet
it is in
tall
very few World
when
War I
on their back
productions.
legs.
It does,
Stopping
however, show
such a
frequently
powerful
in World
animal
War II films,
required an
where it
equally
was also
powerful
a popular
gun.
weapon.
But what would it be like to rely
Set
on
up
your
defense
rifle to
position.
keep you safe
Check.
in such dangers?
Bed him down for
The
the
people
night.
who first
Harry?
used the Winchester model 1886 knew that
There are a
feeling
few
well.
reasons why
Their
the trench
lives
gun
often
shows up so
depended on
rarely
having a
in World War I
reliable
films.
rifle that
One
wouldn't
being is
jam
that
or
there are
break
so few
at the
World
worst
War I
possible
American
moment.
movies.
The model
The more interesting reason,
1886
though,
quickly
is
earned a
perhaps the
reputation
controversy that
as
was
just
once
such a
surrounding the
rifle.
trench gun.
Another
which actually led the
Winchester
American
employee
military to
named
censor
William
photographs of the
Mason
weapon during the
helped
war.
turn Browning's amazing design into something that could be made in a factory. Together, Browning's genius
The
and
M97 was
Mason's
extremely
practical
effective in
knowledge
trench conditions.
created one of the
M97
greatest
trench
rifles
gun
ever
held
made.
5 shells of buckshot,
Winchester started
each
making
containing
the
9
model
33 caliber
1886
pellets.
that year,
It was also
and
issued
didn't
to
stop
American
until
soldiers
1935.
who already had experience
For an
pre-war
insane
with the
50
weapon,
years,
including
the
those who were
model
trap
remained
shooters,
untouched,
with the claim
and
they could
without a
blast
doubt,
an enemy hand grenade
superior to
right out of
anything
the
else
air.
you could find in the market. And a total of 160,000 of these rifles were made in those 50 years. But what made this rifle superior was not just its insane performance, it was the timing of it all. This rifle was being made
In
from
World
the
War I,
final
infantry
years of the
often
Wild
called the
West
M97 a
to
trench
World War
sweeper,
I and into
because
the Great
unlike most
Depression.
modern shotguns,
And it might come
you can
across
simply
as a
hold
shock.
down the trigger
But
of the
did you know
M97
that many of
and
these
it'll
rifles
continue to
are
fire
still
every time
working
the action is
perfectly
closed.
today? Some
This
are over
reputation of
130
brutal
years old and can
effectiveness
still
led
fire
to
as
Germany
well as
making
they
a
did when
political
new.
protest,
This
alleging the
incredible
shotgun breaks the
durability
rules of war.
is one reason why gun collectors value these rifles so highly today. But its performance never came in the way of the beauty this rifle
Of course,
was.
this protest
Winchester
didn't hold
made
much
them
weight,
with
as the
rich
German army
walnut wood
basically
for the
pioneered
stock,
the use of
and
flamethrowers
either
and
shiny
gas during
blue
World War
or
I.
case-hardened
So
steel
all being said,
for
you
the
can
metal
see how if an
parts.
American movie wanted
The
to use the
case-hardening
trench gun
process
in its historic
created
trench
swirling
sweeper
patterns
application,
of blue,
it would
purple,
greatly
and
up
gold
its
colors
censorship
in the
rating.
metal, like a rainbow trapped in steel. Each rifle was a blend of function and
Lending
art.
itself to the menacing
People
reputation
could
of
order
the
these rifles in
M97
different
was
sizes
also the
and
vicious optics of a
styles.
bayonet on a shotgun,
The regular
which
rifle
most certainly
usually
was
had a
used in
26
close quarter fighting,
inch
the kind
barrel,
that took place with this
but you
weapon.
could get shorter
A
carbine
bayonet-mounted
versions
shotgun is a
that
very
were
rare
easier
thing
to
to find
carry
in
on
cinema.
horseback.
I actually had to
There
go
was
to the
even a rare
gaming universe
musket version
and anime to find
extra
one,
long,
but it does give you an
30-inch
idea of the
barrel.
intimidating look.
Customers could choose different sights, triggers, and other special features. These rifles could be personalized to fit exactly what a shooter wanted. What made the
In World War
Winchester
II,
truly
the M97
special
remained
was
a
how
popular
all its
arm
parts
and
worked
was
together
used by the United
perfectly.
States Army
When you
and
push
the
the lever
Marine
down
Corps, who
and
found it
back up,
particularly
everything
useful in
moved
thick jungles
smoothly.
or
A
during the
rifle
clearing
so
of
loved that
Japanese
even
bunkers or
Theodore
fortifications.
Roosevelt, the 26th U.S. president,
By the end of World
carried
War
a
II,
Winchester
the Model
model
1912,
1886
usually called the Model 12,
during his time
largely
as
replaced
a
the
rancher
M97.
in the Dakota
The Model
Badlands.
12 had an internal
Roosevelt
ammo
was
design
famous for
that shared
his
several
love of
features of
hunting
the M97,
and outdoor adventure.
such as having no
He
trigger
trusted the
disconnect,
Model
so it
1886
could be fired
because it
as
was
fast as
strong,
one could pump the action,
reliable,
sometimes
and
known as
powerful
flat
enough
firing.
for the biggest game. In fact, Roosevelt once credited his Model 1886 with saving his life during a run-in with a grizzly bear. Imagine facing one of nature's most dangerous predators with only your rifle standing
So
between
was the
you
M97
and
a good
disaster.
gun, almost in every
For
way,
Roosevelt
commercially
and
a
many
success,
others,
effective
the
in
Winchester
battlefield,
model
well-built,
1886
and
proved
revolutionary
itself
for its
when it
time.
mattered most. How would you feel knowing your life depended on your rifle working perfectly at that critical moment? While the Model
All right, I'm Johnny.
1886
Thanks for
was
watching
mainly
this video on
designed
an
for
American
hunting,
classic
it
firearm.
found its way
As always,
into
I'm just a
battle
movie
too.
fan and not a
One
gun
of the
expert or
strangest
historian,
uses
so
happened
feel free to add
during
any info
World
in the
War
comment
I.
section below,
The British
and we'll see you in the
government
next video.
ordered some Model 1886 rifles in 45 to 90 caliber for a very unusual purpose of shooting down German Zeppelins. To truly understand why the Winchester 1886 stood out, we need to look at what made it different from the rifles that came before it. That difference started with a bold new design by John Browning, one that would change everything. John Browning's new design design for the 1886 was revolutionary because of its locking block system. Previous lever actions used toggle links to lock everything in place when firing. These worked fine for smaller bullets, but could break with more powerful ones. Browning's system used two solid steel blocks that moved up into recesses in the receiver, creating a lockup strong enough for any bullet of that time. This made the 1886 not just stronger, but also smoother to operate. The lever moved with a fluid motion that became Winchester's trademark feel, strong yet elegant. Today, original Winchester model 1886 rifles are treasured by collectors. The rarest versions, like the musket variant with its extra-long barrel, or rifles with special features ordered by the original buyer, can sell for tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's quite a change from their original price of around $20 in the 1880s. These rifles have become investments as well as historical artifacts. What makes them especially valuable is when they have a documented history. A model 1886 that was carried by a famous lawman of the Old West or used on a notable hunting expedition becomes more than just a rifle. It becomes a direct connection to American history. Imagine holding a rifle that might have been present at famous events or carried by legendary figures of the frontier. The stories these rifles could tell, if they could speak. The appeal of the model 1886 is so strong that modern companies still make versions of it today. Manufacturers like Morocco, Uberti, and Winchester itself produce new rifles based on the 1886 design. These modern reproductions let today's shooters experience the legendary action and power without having to find an original antique. Do you think these new versions capture the magic of the originals? Gun enthusiasts debate this question all the time. Some say the modern materials and manufacturing methods make the new ones better, while others insist the originals have a quality and character that can't be duplicated. Perhaps the most important legacy of the model 1886 was the partnership it started between Winchester and John Browning. This team-up would create some of the most famous firearms in history, including the model 1892, the model 1894, and the model 1897 shotgun. Can you think of other famous partnerships that changed history, like Thomas Edison and his companies that brought electricity to America, or Steve Jobs and Apple creating the iPhone? The Winchester-Browning partnership belongs in this special group of relationships that changed the world forever. Even today, original model 1886 rifles in good condition can still be used for hunting. The 4570 government cartridge remains popular, now loaded with modern powders that make it even more powerful than it was in the 1800s. There's something special about hunting with the same rifle design that Roosevelt and other pioneers used more than a century ago. It creates a connection across time, linking modern hunters with those who came before them. Would you choose a modern rifle with its plastic stock and telescopic sight for practical hunting? Or would the history and tradition of a Winchester draw you to it, despite its older design? Many hunters today choose the Winchester precisely because of its connection to the past. You've probably seen this rifle without knowing it. The Winchester Model 1886 has appeared in countless Western movies and TV shows, often carried by characters who need serious firepower. Its classic profile and the respect it commands make it a natural choice for directors wanting to show a character who means business. This appearance in movies and TV has kept the rifle famous long after it stopped being made. Even people who have never held or fired a real Winchester recognize the distinctive shape of a lever-action rifle and connect it with cowboys, the frontier, and the American West. Can you recall seeing a Winchester in a favorite Western movie? There's a good chance it was there, even if you didn't notice it specifically. Important examples of the Model 1886 are kept in museums across America. The National Firearms Museum, the Buffalo Bill Center of the West, and even the Metropolitan Museum of Art all have Winchester Model 1886 rifles in their collections. These museums preserve these special rifles so future generations can see and appreciate them. But here's a twist. Despite creating one of America's most iconic rifles, John Moses Browning never became wealthy from his work with Winchester. The company paid him a flat fee for each design, rather than royalties based on sales. Browning later changed this arrangement with other companies, but his early Winchester designs, including the model 1886, earned him far less than they were truly worth. Does this surprise you? The man who created such an important piece of American history didn't get rich from it, yet Browning kept inventing, creating dozens of firearms designs that are still used today. He seemed driven more by the joy of solving mechanical problems than by money. There's a lesson there about following your passion, regardless of the reward. Another little-known fact is that the Winchester Model 1886 was so strong that when smokeless powder came along in the early 1900s, the 1886 was one of the few existing rifle designs that could handle the increased pressure. Winchester simply needed to use different steel for the barrel, and the basic action Browning designed was already strong enough. How's that for thinking ahead? Did you know that some of these rifles served in both world wars? While never officially adopted by the U.S. military, privately owned Winchester 1886 rifles went to war with their owners, who volunteered or were drafted. Some saw action in the Spanish-American War, World War I, and even World War II in the Pacific. These rifles proved their worth in some of history's most challenging conditions. If you could own any rifle from American history, would you choose the model 1886? What does your answer say about what you value? Power, reliability, beauty, or historical significance? The 1886 offers all these qualities, which explains why it has remained so desirable for so long. The legacy of the Winchester Model 1886 lives on today in surprising ways. Modern rifle designers still study its action when creating new firearms. Competitive shooters and cowboy action shooting events use reproductions of the 1886 to test their skills. Hunters seeking a connection to traditional ways